When people hear the word grief, they usually think of death, which makes sense. Death is the form of grief most of us recognize immediately. It has rituals, ceremonies, condolences. People know what to say, even if they don't always say it particularly well. But over the years, I've become increasingly interested in another kind of grief. The kind that does not come with a funeral, the kind nobody immediately recognizes as grief at all. A relationship ends, not necessarily dramatically, sometimes it simply runs out of road. You lose a friendship you thought would last forever. You leave a city and discover years later that part of you never really left. A career that does not happen, a marriage that does not last, a child that does not happen, a version of your future quietly disappears while you're busy making other plans. And because nobody died, people often assume grief isn't the right word. I think they're wrong. One of the things literature understands remarkably well is that human beings grieve more than death. We grieve possibilities, we grieve identities, we grieve versions of ourselves. Sometimes we grieve things that never existed outside our imagination. And yet the loss is real anyway. I think most adults eventually discover this. You reach a certain age and realize your life is partly made up of roads taken and roads not taken. Some of those untaken roads don't bother you at all. Others stay with you. Not every day, just occasionally. A thought while making tea, a conversation overheard in a cafe, a photograph from 10 years ago. And suddenly you're thinking about the person you thought you would become. I don't think we have many public rituals for these experiences. Nobody sends sympathy cards because your life turned out differently than expected. Nobody brings casseroles because a dream quietly fell apart. Most of these losses are carried privately. Not even someone to share a word with. Which is one reason literature can be so useful during periods of grief. Not because books fix grief. I don't think grief is something that needs fixing. But books often provide recognition, and recognition matters. Particularly when you're experiencing something difficult that nobody around you seems to have language for. One of the strangest experiences in life is feeling something intensely while lacking the vocabulary to describe it. You know something hurts. You know something has changed, but every available word feels slightly wrong. Then you encounter a novel, or a poem, or an essay, and suddenly somebody has written down the thing you've been carrying around for months, possibly years. Not solved it, you just have a name for it now. Those are different things. I think we underestimate how powerful naming can be. Part of why grief feels so disorienting is that it disrupts the story we thought we were living. The future we imagined no longer exists, the relationships we relied on no longer exists, the person we used to be no longer exists. And now we have to figure out who we are in the absence of something that once felt essential. Literature spends an extraordinary amount of time exploring exactly this problem. Not because writers are uniquely tragic people, though some of them certainly gave it their best effort, but because loss is one of the most universal human experience there is. Every life eventually contains it. The details change, the structure remains remarkably similar. Something matters, something changes. A person must learn how to continue. And what I find comforting about literature is that it rarely rushes this process. The internet loves closure. Everything is supposed to become a lesson, a breakthrough, a 5-step framework. Literature is usually much more patient. It understands that some experiences take longer than that, sometimes much longer. A novel can spend hundreds of pages sitting beside uncertainty. A poem can remain unresolved for its entire existence. An essay can end with a question instead of an answer. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons grieving people often find themselves returning to books. Not because books provide certainty, because they make room for uncertainty. They allow people to inhabit experiences that are unfinished. And grief is almost always unfinished, even years later, especially years later. One thing I would gently challenge is the idea that reading during grief needs to be productive. People often ask what they should learn from loss, what they should gain from it, how they should grow. I understand the impulse, but sometimes grief is not a lesson. Sometimes it is simply that grief. And reading does not need to transform it into something useful. Sometimes a book is valuable because it keeps a person company while they move through something difficult. That may sound like a small thing. I don't think it is. Ask someone who's experienced this. The companionship has always been one of literature's greatest strengths. Not solutions, not answers. Companionship. The feeling that another human being, perhaps separated from you by decades or centuries, understood enough about being alive to leave something behind that still feels recognizable. I think that's why certain books arrive at exactly the right moment. Not because they remove grief, because they help us feel less alone inside it. If you're carrying a loss that doesn't have a name, a ceremony, or a social acceptable script attached to it, I hope you know that your feelings still count. They matter more than you think. Literature certainly thinks so. And honestly, I do too. And if you're someone who might like to read a little bit more on grief or specialized reading recommendations, especially on grief, I have a recent post on my Patreon. The link is in the description box below. Do consider joining. You will also receive a 30-day beginner-friendly prompt book which might help you just begin putting your feelings on paper.